38. Deputy Doherty.
First of all, I think we've all just seen the news of the tragic plane crash in India on its way to London, and all we can say at this time is our thoughts are with all of those affected as we wait for news, but shocking this morning. I also, asking Cordia, want to extend my condolences to Chapta Rose Conway-Walsh, whose mother, Philomena Conway, passed away this morning. And my thoughts are with Rose, all her brothers and sisters, and indeed her whole family at this time, difficult time for them. Ar Yeshe Gro Ahanam. Hanishe tan rialtas trína ó hiú tíhiachta dé trína chéile crobodacht hart agus I geri botún móra a cheartús an plán císa a tanáim a bhéagah. Tá inniúlachta an rialtas dóchreite agus an tain rud a tá cinnte na go raibh císna tá rá ar teannahéin raibh siad an airde mar harú ar word good Malty. Tánaise, the spin surrounding your chaotic proposals to reform the rental sector is unravelling day by day. The government is at sixes and sevens, caught up in damage limitation exercise because people can see right through what this plan is all about. It's about pushing up already extortionate rents even higher. And as you know, what it will do is it's going to allow landlords themselves to set the market rate for all new tenancies. You know you're opening the gates to massive rent hikes for people who are already under serious pressure. And the government know all of this. After March the 1st, these renters will be hit with massive rent increases. And this is especially true for young people. By the very nature of their lives, whether it's for work or education, they tend to move frequently. Young people, the generation who've already been shafted by your housing crisis, are going to be on the hook for even bigger rent hikes. We know students and their families, already desperate for affordable accommodation, will be absolutely fleeced when these changes kick in. In fact, the Irish Hospital Consultants Association issued a damning statement yesterday, warning that your plan could impact on the essential healthcare staff required to move during their training, finding affordable accommodation. The madness of this plan, Taoiseach, is only matched by the incompetence of your government's approach. It is a complete and utter botch job. On Tuesday, you were telling the media through the department that the rent pressure zones will come into effect on March the 1st. Indeed, your minister was in prime time confirming that. That meant that tens of thousands of these renters will face the prospect of massive rent hikes as landlords move to benefit before the changes kick in. These are the people who've already seen double-digit rent increases, and now they're going to be thrown to the wolves. They can't take any more. On top of that, the government's clumsy approach runs the risks of landlords holding off putting properties back up for rent until March, when the changes were about to come in. In your haste to pander to big landlords and wealthy property funds, the government wrote this on the back of an envelope. And there was no consideration in relation to the impact for renters. It was an afterthought. That is why we're in such a big mess. So now it's panic stations from government. This morning, the government is scrambling around like headless chickens, trying to find a way to rush forward the changes to rent laws before the doll breaks for the summer. The incompetence here, Taoiseach, is off the charts. It seems that the only real thought given to this plan was how to screw over renters. And fair play, you did that with 5 golden stars. So, Taoiseach, the questions are, when are we going to see the legislation? Who are we to believe here? Is it your minister who was on prime time saying that it's not going to happen until March? Or is it now what we read in terms of the headless chicken approach that you're going to try and rush this through before the summer recess? Do you accept, Taoiseach, that existing landlords, even in existing rent pressure zones, letting to new tenants after the 1st of March, will be able to jack up rents as high as they wish to new tenants, whether they're students, whether they're trainee nurses or anybody else, before they move in? And will you simply admit that delivering higher rents for landlords and investors is what this plan is really about? Because that is the outcome, without a doubt, of what you have announced.
Well, thanks very much, Deputy Doherty, for raising this important issue in relation to renters and housing supply. And can I join with you at the outset in extending my sympathy to all of those caught up in the very tragic and horrific plane crash this morning. And we think of all of them and their families, as you say, in what is an evolving story, with no doubt more information to come. And I too want to extend my sympathies to your colleague, to Deputy Rose Conway-Walsh, on the loss of her mother, Ar Yeshe Gro Ahanam. We think of her at this time. The government took a number of decisions this week to actually extend rental supports and protections. Let's not forget that but prior to that decision, the rent pressure zones were due to expire at the end of this year. Rental protections associated with that were due to disappear. And the government worked intensively to come up with a package that is balanced and that provides an extension of the rent pressure zones. There are so many parts of your county, in fact I think your entire county, Carndonagh, Buncrana, Lifford, Letterkenny, Milford, Glenties, Donegal Town, your constituents, who as of today are not protected by rent pressure zones. And under our proposal and under the emergency legislation that we bring forward next week, which I heard your leader say you'll support, we will extend the rent pressure zones to people living in Donegal and to people living in other parts of the country, including Carlow, Cavan, parts of Cork, Clare, Kerry, Laois, Leitrim, Longford, Mayo, Monaghan and elsewhere. So that's what we're doing. We're extending rent pressure zones nationwide. And we're also keeping, for existing tenants, that 2% rate as well. Now, it is important to recognise that the government proposals didn't fall from the sky. The government proposals are grounded in the Housing Agency's review of this matter. And the Housing Agency, for those looking in at home, is the body charged with accelerating housing supply. That's what it's asked to do. Come up with ideas and proposals as to how we can accelerate housing supply. And we've published the Housing Agency's report. It's a detailed document. I'm sure you've had the time to go through it. And it's outlined a number of findings. It's outlined how there's been evidence of meaningful price moderation due to the RPZs. It's outlined how institutional investment has reduced considerably since 2023. And it's also made a number of recommendations, including based on international literature review. It's come up with concerns around how you would actually go about reference rent and the challenges that would pose, similar challenges outlined by the ESRI. So this is the latest measure to actually help support renters. And you're continuing to misinform people. So people watching in today in rental accommodation need to know we've kept the RPZs for them. We've extended a protection that was due to leave. People in your county and other counties who don't have the protection of RPZs need to know that next week we will bring forward legislation to extend those protections. But we also have to look at what we can do in relation to supply, because the people, the sons and daughters and other people who want to rent, they need more accommodation to be built. And therefore we've taken a balanced approach that supports renters but also provides security in terms of, and clarity and certainty in terms of those who may wish to invest in our country. And of course this is just the latest of a series of announcements we've made. Extending planning permissions, expanding exempted developments, extending the role of the Land Development Agency, the new national planning framework to have more zoned land, and very shortly a very significant capital investment in water, wastewater and energy so we can deliver that enabling infrastructure. All of these measures need to be looked at in the round to try and get a functioning housing market that can get us to the 300,000 homes we need over the next number of years. And the measures in the package we've brought forward this week is balanced. And I was at the Cabinet meeting this week. Just to be clear, it was always the intention that we would bring forward an initial bill to extend the rent pressure zones and then a further piece of legislation which we can take the time to tease through to get this right in terms of what the new system looks like from March.
Taoiseach, do you really believe that guff? Do you believe that spin? 14 years of Fine Gael government and rents have never been higher. You're absolutely crucifying renters. And what you've done with your plan, when you cut through all of the spin, is that every single new tenancy, whether it's in Ardara or in Drumcondra, it makes no difference. After the 1st of March, the landlord will be able to set the price to whatever they want. Under existing law at the minute, in a rent pressure zone, that is not allowed. This is a charter for higher rents. This is a charter for the vulture funds and for the property developers. It is benefiting landlords. That is the only people who will benefit here, because we know that tens of thousands of people move out of rental pressure zone. So tell me this, Taoiseach, and you used to be the Minister for Higher Education. You mentioned Ardara, Letterkenny and Buncrana. See the student that goes next year and rents the house in Drumcondra in a rent pressure zone. Is the landlord able to jack up that price to whatever he wants before he lets that house? The answer is yes, because what you have allowed is a free rein to every single landlord who lets a property out to a new tenant. That is the reality. And your answer to sky-high rents is to push them even further. And that is shameful. That is why so many people feel that Ireland is no longer their home. That is why we have 100,000 people born in this country now living in Australia, and you have made the situation worse.
Out of time.
So the government produced a series of measures this week that will extend for the very first time the rent pressure zones to the constituency you represent in Dáil Éireann. And do you not welcome that? Do you know, did you, no, hang on a second. In Donegal today, there's no rent pressure zones. In the proposals brought forward by Minister Brown, the rent pressure zones will be extended to your constituency, and we'll bring forward legislation next week to do that. You didn't reference the changes in relation to no-fault evictions. You didn't recognise the fact that rent pressure zones were due to expire in December. Did we not take these measures? But the only, I'll answer, and I won't be shouted down, thank you. The only split and confusion that seems to be taking place in relation to housing policy is in Sinn Féin. Mary Lou MacDonald, your leader. No, hang on a second. Hang on a second. Hang on, I'm answering the question, thanks. Mary Lou MacDonald said she's in favour. Mary Lou MacDonald said she's in favour of rent pressure zones. Oh no, Bryn said he's not. He's in favour of reference rent. Reference rent would see people's rents be pushed up. Mary Lou MacDonald said she doesn't want institutional investment in Ireland. Owen O'Brien said yourself and himself meet them regularly. Sinn Féin are all over the place on housing. Your policy didn't work, so you don't have a housing policy now. All you have is noise and street activism. We will be taking specific measures to support students. Don't worry, we will, because we'll have their backs. We'll expand the rent pressure zone, and you need to work out why you want to bring in reference rents and push up rents, and why you wanted to abolish the rent pressure zones. Shame.
Deputy Marie Sherlock, resume your seat. Deputy Doherty.
Because you don't want to tell
Deputy Sherlock.
Is to push rents sky high.
Deputy Sherlock, please.
You refuse to answer the question. You refuse to answer the question.
Deputy Sherlock has the floor. Deputy Sherlock, please.
Sky high rents.
Deputy Sherlock.
Germagat Lascian Corla, and my thoughts are also to the loved ones on that flight from Ahmedabad to England. I have friends in Ahmedabad, and obviously we're hugely worried about them today, and our condolences as well on behalf of the Labour Party to Deputy Conway Walsh and the loss of her mother. Taoiseach, one of the most difficult decisions a family will ever have to take is to put a loved one into a nursing home. It is a decision that places enormous trust in strangers to treat that older person with respect and dignity that they deserve in the final years of their life. The brilliant investigative journalism by RT last week showed very distressing scenes in both Glasnevin and Portlaoise, and in the weeks since then, really all the focus has been on the very serious failures within HIQA. Now, there are some good nursing homes out there, just as there are some good people in HIQA. But what really worries me right now is that the government somehow believes that if HIQA tries harder, if the adult safeguarding legislation is brought in to investigate individual complaints after those incidents, of course, happen, then all will be fine. Well, it will not. And there are huge questions for government right now about the type of care that we want for our older people in this country. Taoiseach, do we want a nursing home system where there's no minimum staffing levels? Those standards exist in the north, they exist in other countries, but they do not exist here. HIQA provides no guidance to nursing homes on safe staffing levels. So if you're a provider where profit is your chief motivation, and there are many of them out there, are you going to ensure that you have the right number of nurses and healthcare assistants on your premises? You are not. The PwC report on nursing home staff in 2023 found the staff turnover of healthcare assistants in private nursing homes was as high as 54% in 2022. Even the childcare sector doesn't have staff turnover figures as high as that. Sitting in the Department of Health since 2022 is a task force, a report by a task force put together by your department, which recommends a living wage for all public and private sector nursing home staff. It recommends consideration of a pay agreement for the sector, along with other important changes. And what has happened since then? Nothing. Many of those workers are still on the minimum wage. Some providers are failing to pay the work permit minimums, according to the reports that I'm getting, and there is huge frustration amongst the workers being forced to work extremely long hours in that sector. So, Taoiseach, I have to ask you, are you comfortable that the nursing home sector is becoming dominated by big business in Ireland? Are you comfortable that that to whom we are entrusting the care of our people is increasingly being dominated by big business. Yesterday, my party leader, Ivana Bacik, spoke of 10 investment funds owning 1/3 of all nursing home beds in Ireland. We know from ESRI research that 20% of smaller private nursing homes closed between 2020 and 2022, and we're seeing the growth of nursing homes driven by private equity-owned operators. The reality is that many are owned by what are called propcos, who are REITs, who of course pay no tax. There's a separate entity to operate them known as opcos. And the reality is that smaller nursing homes are effectively being crowded out. So, Taoiseach, I have 3 questions for you now. Do you want workers to be properly resourced, to be paid decently, and to work under conditions that they can provide the best possible care? Will you implement the recommendations of the 2022 report, and will you commit to the state playing a leading role in developing residential long-term care alongside smaller private nursing homes in this country?
Well, thanks very much, Deputy Sherlock, and thank you for highlighting this. It's really important issue. And the short answer is I believe the state is too reliant on the private market when it comes to nursing home provision, and that's why we established a Commission of Care. Because I do think we need to look at the entire model of how we care for older people in this country. I also think, by the way, that the fact that we have one statutory scheme as to how we care for older people, which is nursing home, but we don't yet have a statutory scheme for home care, and that option is another issue. And I will commit with the Minister, Minister Cara McNeill and Minister O'Donnell, to work constructively with yourself and your own party in relation to these issues, and I'll also ask that consideration is given to some of the issues you referenced in relation to the 2022 report. Can I make this point though too? We do need to get the safeguarding legislation in place, and I think that's been very apparent in what we've seen over the last number of days with Ortiz very excellent work. The Minister will bring to Cabinet within the next month the adult safeguarding policy and seek government permission to draft the safeguarding bill, and we will then work intensively and constructively with members across this House to get the right piece of legislation passed in a timely manner. I think that is really, really important. I also do think this too, and I've been reflecting on this, and I fully accept that people work in very demanding environments. I fully accept that as well. But I do also believe what stems from what we've seen on our television screens in recent days are real questions of personal accountability. There are laws in our land today. There are laws in relation to assault. There are laws in relation to how we conduct ourselves. And I would urge that a referral is made to An Garda Síochána in relation to the footage that we saw. Because what I saw with my own 2 eyes, the haunting scenes of people being, in my view, physically assaulted in their home is something that, you know, the government has responsibilities here to do things, absolutely, but so too do people who carry out those actions. And I do think there's a need for a Garda investigation into what we saw in relation to the individual actions of people in relation to that. I think HICWA also have, questions to answer, and I welcome the fact that Minister Cara McNeill is due to meet with them, along with Minister O'Donnell. HICWA is a good organisation in many ways. I know HICWA a long time. I think they've done good. I do, and I think there's good people in HICWA, but I think there were serious shortcomings as well in relation to this. There can be no doubt about that. Actions that should have been identified and acted upon at a much earlier stage. So, yes, I do think we need to have a much broader discussion about the model of care that we have for older people in this country. That work is underway. Of course, pay and terms and conditions, just like as you rightly say in other sectors like childcare and stuff, is a factor in that too. But I think we also need to get the legislative basis right. I think safeguarding legislation, I think making sure that HICWA understands its role and has all the tools that it needs. And I also think then looking at statutory home care as well as an alternative legal basis for how we care for older people are 3 areas that I'd like to see action on shortly.
Minister for Health, when the inquiry into private nursing homes, or the report was published in 2020 with regards to the failures that happened within nursing homes. And you were the Minister for Health that then saw those recommendations, very clear recommendations, which to my mind have not been recommended. We have a plethora of reports within the Department of Health post-pandemic, mainly stemming from 2020 to 2022, which have not been enacted. There are hundreds of thousands of people out there who are looking to their future. We know that there's going to be 500,000 people over the age of 80 20 by the time in 25 years' time. There's people in my constituency who are 3 generations to a house, and they will have no choice but to go into a nursing home. We can have all the home care supports they want. They will end up going into a nursing home when they get to a particular stage of their lives, and they need to know that they will get the care that they need. There is a pattern between Lees Cross, between the failures in 2020 and what was revealed last week, and it is the influence of big business, in my view, in my party's view, with regards to how they, I suppose, have used nursing home care in this country to generate profits and not provide adequate care on the ground, and the state needs to take a leading role in that regard.
Yeah, look, I agree with your earlier point that there are many good nursing homes in this country. There are many good public nursing homes. There are many good private nursing homes, big and small, right across the country. And I don't have an ideological view in relation to that. I just want older people to have choice in relation to their care. I want their families to be supported in making those decisions. And I want to know whether it's a public nursing home or a private nursing home, that everyone is safe, that everyone is being treated with dignity. And I would think we should be, I do think we should also be more ambitious about care in the community. I do believe that. I believe far too many people in Ireland go into a nursing home far too early. I can think of good examples of where we have housing alternatives in place and home care opportunities, but they're far too rare. And that's why Minister O'Donnell becomes the first Minister for Older People ever that's been based between the Department of Health and the Department of Housing, because I think we have to get this model right. But I also think there are genuine serious issues of personal accountability. There is no law, there is no ideology, or there is no model of care that can excuse away, either in its existence or its absence, the conduct of people who decided to physically manhandle elderly people with dementia, and I want them held accountable, and I want the Gardaí to look at the matter.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Ruth Coppinger.
Taoiseach, I'm wondering how important you think the issue of gender-based violence actually is. The United Nations and the WHO say it's the greatest threat to the health of women and girls in the world. There's been an increase, a record number of calls to Women's Aid, a rise in calls to Gardaí for the issue of gender-based violence. I'm struggling to find one measure that your government has introduced in the 6 months. But today, you had a chance to allow a bill to progress that would actually deal with something very concrete that survivors and therapists are very much behind, and that you actually supported only a year ago, which is the outline of counselling notes being accessed by defence teams in trials of gender-based violence. You've decided, your government, to delay my bill, which is going to be discussed later in the Dáil today, by a year. A very cynical measure, and something that will be noted by so many people. This is an unbelievably damaging and misogynistic practice for survivors. Sarah Grace, I'll give you the example yet again of what she said. In many ways, I found my trial more traumatic than the attack. Can you imagine saying that? I would take the attack again. Sorry, it's very difficult with the noise. Before having to set foot back in that courtroom. The most heartbreaking obstacle of all was a seizure of my counselling notes. Are you listening to what survivors are saying about our legal system? That they'd actually go through the attack again rather than go through the legal system. And one of the things, most egregious things that they mention is the fact that their therapy notes could be read by the perpetrator of the heinous crime against them. Just let that rest with you, Minister. So I have a bill to outlaw it. I don't know what your excuse is. We've been hearing from the Minister that it could be unconstitutional. Evictions, we couldn't ban them up until this week. Now suddenly they're not unconstitutional. Therapists are going to be gathering at the Dáil later in support of my bill. 60 professionals wrote to the Ministers for Health, for Mental Health and Justice this week. This is a health issue, by the way. Not just a mental health issue, it's a health issue, because survivors of gendered violence are much more likely to have self-harm, to have poor physical health, to have suicidal ideation, eating disorders, and therapy is the one avenue that would possibly help them work through those issues. One of the therapists that I spoke to yesterday on the phone, who's signed that letter, told me a 15-year-old has dropped out of CAMHS because they heard in the media that their therapy notes could be accessed in court. That's a survivor of child abuse, dropping out of therapy because of this. How long are we going to have to wait? Why would it take you a year to come up with a bill in the first place? Why would you put a stop of a year in my bill? People have waited. Helen McEntee said she'd do it in 2023. You said on the 2nd of July in the Dáil 2024, Micheál Martin, and here we are again. We have a bill to be tabled in the Dáil and you're going to delay it.
Thanks very much, Deputy Coppinger. Firstly, I don't think that's a fair portrayal of the government's record and my own party's record or the government's position in relation to this issue. The minister sitting beside me, I'd challenge you to name any minister who's done more in relation to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence than Minister Helen McEntee, genuinely, and who worked on a cross-party basis at every opportunity to make progress. And you don't have to take my word for that. Victims groups acknowledge that, survivors groups acknowledge that, and I saw it with my own 2 eyes as well. So, you know, not every issue has to be partisan, and not every issue has to be government. Sorry. Yeah, well, no, hang on. You just, Deputy Coppinger, you have a great. This is a very sensitive issue. I'm just making the point. That every time you stand up, it doesn't have to be the government's a terrible bunch of people and you're great. Sometimes, perhaps, there are just some issues that are so important, we should actually work together to try and make progress on them. And the reason we're delaying your bill, to use your phrase, is out of absolutely no disrespect for your bill. It's actually out of respect for what you're trying to do and in recognition of the fact that we have our own bill. So Minister Jim O'Callaghan has last month, in advance of your bill being tabled for discussion in this House, last month received government approval to bring forward legislation in this area, building on Minister McEntee's work, to make sure that we rectify the exact issue you rightly highlight. Because I too have met victims, and I'm horrified. How can anyone not shudder when they hear what you said about that victim of child abuse, survivor of child abuse, you know, and the impact that's had on them accessing CAMS? You're not wrong on this. This is a very serious issue, Lascian Corla, that has a real chilling effect on victims and how our criminal justice system and our court system interacts with them. So it is our intention to legislate, and not just our intention. Minister O'Callaghan already has government approval for the general scheme of criminal law and civil law miscellaneous provisions Bill 2025. And that's the vehicle through which we intend to address this issue. We're not going to vote down your bill because it's an honest effort to make progress on a very important issue, and therefore we're saying let your bill be read today and let the minister's bill come forward and let's try and get progress on this on a cross-party basis. Let's work together in relation to this. Now, I should just say for the record of the House that there was an effort in 2017 to reform the law in this area and put in place a process through which the courts would assess relevance of counselling records. Not saying it's perfect, far from it, but my understanding is that legislation has not operated in any manner or means as it was intended to. And therefore we've listened very carefully to the views of victims. We've listened very carefully to the views of survivors, and they've made clear that they felt compelled to agree to waive the disclosure hearing in order not to put a successful prosecution at risk or risk delaying their trial. That's an appalling vista and was never the intention of the 2017 provision. Records are routinely being released. That was not the intention of the 2017 provision. And we're fully aware of the distress and the re-victimisation that disclosure of personal records can have on survivors of sexual violence, including counselling records. So we're not waiting for a year to do anything. The Minister has approval to draft this legislation. You bring forward your legislation today, and we will work constructively to get a good, robust bill passed as quickly as possible.
Thanks so much, Deputy Coppinger.
The irony of hearing you, let's all work together, when you're stopping my bill, you could allow the bill progress and then you could actually debate it and put amendments to it at committee stage. The problem with the bill that the Minister seems to be talking about, it is not going to exclude the potential for counselling notes to be admitted. That's the problem. And the actual potential of having your therapy notes accessed is what creates the trauma and is what is putting people off taking cases. So that you're not going to exclude that. So that is the problem. The right to a fair trial is very important, but the right to actually pursue a case, you know, for a crime committed against you is too. There's no evidential value in counselling notes. I blame Eamon de Valera for a lot of things, but I doubt he was putting counselling notes top of his agenda when he put in, you know, the article dealing with fair trials. Minister, your government, there was a lot said about zero tolerance, but every single misogynistic practice that I highlighted in here in 2018 is still going on in the courts. You can still have your clothing, you can still have your underwear, your contraception, your alcohol intake, your drug intake used against you in court. All the victim blaming is still there. None of that has been dealt with by your successive governments at all, since the I Believer marches, since the Cork rape trial, since the Belfast rape trial.
Please conclude,
that's the problem.
Deputy Coppinger. Tánaiste.
Thank you very much, Deputy. So let me be clear. Domestic, sexual and gender-based violence is still an epidemic in this country, and globally, but in Ireland too, we're not immune in relation to that. That's not to say that the issues and the work that has been taken hasn't brought about real assistance, expansion of refuge places, establishment of CUAN, record funding for groups working with people in this area as well. Training now being in place, which is a key part of the zero tolerance strategy, training for people in the public service, training for our court system as well. But our court system is not where it needs to be. It's not where it needs to be, and I think members of the judiciary recognise that too, and that's why we're changing the law. So please, 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 on this issue, don't start telling people we're blocking your bill and we're doing nothing for a year. That is called misinformation. It's called fake news. We're not blocking your bill. We're passing a timed amendment that means your bill moves forward in 12 months if we haven't gotten our act together. And we're going to get our act together. That's why Minister O'Callaghan already a month before your bill got permission to draft his own bill. So victims and survivors don't care whose bill it is. They care about action. And this government's going to take action to protect victims, to make sure we do it in a way that is constitutional, is compatible with our constitution, but does protect victims and survivors in a way they are not today. And that's what we're going to do, and we're going to get it right.
Thanks, Taoiseach. Deputy Michael Collins.
Thank you, Taoiseach. This country is crying out for accountability from regulatory bodies as we stumble from one scandal to another. Last week I attended a public meeting in Ardmore, Galway with Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice, Councillor Declan Kelly, and met with parents whose children were scammed by a local orthodontist and neglected by the Dental Council of Ireland. These parents paid large sums up front in 2022 for their children's dental treatment, only to find out they were being deceived. Some children were left with misaligned jaws, others with braces, but no treatment plan. And some had to remove their braces themselves or with the help of others over the phone. One girl had a wire sticking into her mouth, which her boyfriend eventually cut with the clippers. These parents have faced significant challenges from the previous government and the Dental Council and the former Minister for Health, with no solutions or support available. The Dental Council of Ireland is supposed to investigate the fitness of registered dentists to practice based on allegations of professional misconduct or unfitness due to physical or mental disability. But according to the parents of these children, the Dental Council have done absolutely nothing to help them, and these parents and children have been left with over $2 million out of pocket, and children with denture neglect at a very delicate age in their lives. Another area of non-accountability, Taoiseach, is where I recently raised in the Dáil with the Taoiseach during leaders' questions twice the scam that is going on with certain financial advisors. On foot of that, I attended a meeting with the Central Bank and some of the people affected who have had their lives destroyed because of these financial advisors. I was informed at this meeting with the Central Bank that the Central Bank, regulates financial advisors, but these financial advisors can sell unregulated products. On the website of the Central Bank, if you go into it, it states that the Central Bank, as the regulator of financial services providers and markets in Ireland, the Central Bank has to ensure that the best interests of the consumers are protected. So where is the protection for those who I know of who have lost over 200 million by the Central Bank? The third area of non-compliance is the recent RT Investigates documentary titled Inside Ireland's Nursing Home, which has uncovered serious concerns about the standards of care in several residential facilities run by EMIS Ireland, the country's largest provider of private nursing homes. The documentary, which aired June 4, 2025, revealed issues such as staff shortages, unsafe care practices and undignified treatment of residents. The investigation involves undercover researchers who documented multiple instances of neglect and poor care, including residents being left unsupervised, improper manual handling and inadequate response to residents' needs. Nursing homes in Ireland are primarily regulated by the Health Information and Quality Authority, HIQA, and HIQA is responsible for inspecting and registering residential care for services for older people, including both public and private nursing homes. They ensure that these facilities meet the required standards of care and safety. So where were HIQA, Taoiseach? So we are forever here in this Dáil seeking facts after the events and well-paid regulatory bodies showing absolutely no accountability. How do you suggest we hold these bodies accountable going forward, Taoiseach?
Well, thanks very much, Deputy Collins. There's quite a lot in that, so let me endeavour to get through it. So firstly, maybe to start where you finished, in relation to the issue of accountability and the safety and well-being of people in our nursing homes. Just to reiterate, it's the Minister for Health, Minister Karen McNeil's intention, along with Minister Kieran O'Donnell, to bring forward adult safeguarding policy proposals within the next month or so, and to also seek permission from the government to draft the general scheme in relation to safeguarding legislation. This is badly needed, will make a big difference, and I know is something that many experts and others who contributed to the RT programme commented on the acute need for. It's a priority for government, and we will make progress in relation to that. The Minister loves to meet with HICWA herself in the next week, and there'll be an opportunity for, I'm sure, a full and frank exchange of views in relation to this. I think the establishment of HICWA was an important step. There are good people who work in HICWA. HICWA do a good job, but no organisation is beyond reproach or beyond questioning as to what happened in relation to specific cases, and I do think there's legitimate questions that government will want to answer and explore with HICWA. In relation to the issue of dental legislation and the likes, obviously Lasky and Corla need to be careful in one matter, because I believe the case referred to in the article is perhaps before the courts and subject to in-camera proceedings, but that doesn't prohibit me from answering the broader point, which is in relation to the practice of dentistry and the reforms that the Minister for Health intends to lead on. So my understanding is dentistry is currently underpinned by a range of legislation, and the Dentist Act of 1985 is just one. The Minister Carol McNeil is committed to reviewing and updating that Act, and the continued protection of the public and high oral healthcare standards will be a priority in relation to that. But in the meantime, I'm very pleased to say that the Minister did sign a commencement order in relation to certain provisions of the Regulated Professions Health and Social Care Amendment Act on the 30th of April 2020, which I think came into effect on the 6th of May of this year. And that basically requires dentists to make statutory declarations in relation to any disciplinary proceedings, any judicial proceedings in the state or in another jurisdiction which may directly or indirectly result in the dentist being prohibited or restricted from providing one or more kind of health or social care. It's also broadened the grounds for inquiry to include matters which might be declared by a dentist or where a dentist fails to comply with the declarations requirement. And this important provision is intended to ensure that the Dental Council becomes aware much more early as well. So reform of the Dentist Act planned for and those new regulations in place. And finally, on the issue regarding regulation of financial advisors, and I'm pleased that the Central Bank of Ireland met with you and your constituents, as you say, I think in May of this year, to discuss issues you've raised in this House and indeed to advise on their role. I think your constituents and you found that meeting to be helpful. We're very happy to engage with you constructively on any lagunas or areas where you believe there is a need for improvement from a regulatory or legislative perspective.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach, for your reply. But how can anyone, you speak about, dental, we'll say regulation, Dental Act 2024, 2025. These people have been hit hard in 2022. They've lost €2 million. How can any of these people have confidence when you see the regulatory bodies fail the very people they are to protect? What do you say to the parents and children in their hundreds that are scammed out of their hard-working money in Ardmore, Galway, to over €2 million, leaving these children in a shocking condition, to the point, as I said earlier, of a young woman's boyfriend cutting the wire out of her mouth himself with some type of clippers? And since 2022, in spite of meetings with ministers and others, the Dental Council have washed their hands and have walked away without a care in the world for the damage, both mental and physical, done to these children. Taoiseach, will you step in here and meet with the Dental Council to hold them accountable, hold them to do what they are supposed to do for these people, so something like this can never happen again, and compensate these innocent people who have been scammed out of their hard-earned money?
No, thanks very much, Deputy Collins. I'm very conscious of not wanting to say anything that cuts across any legal process, court process. I know the Deputy is as well, so I'll refrain from going any further on that issue, other than to reiterate that the Minister Carol McNeil, who's here with us, is committed to, as is the programme for government, reviewing the dental legislation more broadly for the reasons that I've outlined. And obviously a number of regulations have been commenced recently since the Minister took office that became effective in May, that I think are positive developments in terms of modernising the regulatory structures that underpin the work of our dentists. On the issue of the Central Bank and financial advisors, because I ran out of time a little bit the last time, I mean, just to say we are eager to continue to engage on this. When it comes to the protection of retail investors, the Department of Finance and the Central Bank work in tandem. Central Bank obviously regulates firms that operate in Ireland, including those who provide investment advice and sell investment products. And I'd also flag the role of the Financial Services and Pensions Ombudsman too. But if there are areas here, because we should always be striving to do better, we're very happy to engage further on this too. Thank you.